In 2014, a pregnant teenager was found brutally murdered in a home in Pearland, Texas. The police investigation focused on the victim's 16-year-old boyfriend, the father of her unborn children. Teenagers can sometimes be accused of being egocentric, but one young man took narcissism to a whole new level. This is what happens when you interfere in the plans of a sociopath. This is the murder of Arrijana Hill. Hi and welcome back to my channel, my lovelies. Thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate every single one of you, as you know. Thanks to all my YouTube members and my Patreon members. Couldn't do this without you. And also to anybody who gives me a like, a follow, or subscribes if you're here for the first time and you like what you see. If you're here for like the third time and you haven't subscribed, well, just do it now. I'm gonna be talking about a case that is horrifying today. I think that we always find young people killers very challenging to process because essentially it goes against the grain of what we expect for children and young people. They're meant to be enjoying their lives, having fun, hanging out with their friends, thinking about their futures and all the things that make growing up into a young adult the exciting experience it can be. But what we're going to talk about today is what can happen when a mindset is so egocentric, so narcissistic, that the only conceived outcome is a disastrous one. Because the world is full of people who make different decisions to you. The world is full of different ideas about what's right and what's wrong. And if you cannot compute that, and if you refuse to accept that, then eventually, no matter where you are or what you're doing, it's going to turn out badly. And certainly the case today is going to demonstrate that very, very powerfully. So in 2014, we have Arrijana Simone Hill. She was a really happy, healthy 16-year-old, really successful. She was living with her family in Pearland, Texas. She was known to be a really special kind of human. I'm going to describe her a little bit, but you'll understand when I talk about what those who loved her thought about her and the impact that she had on their lives. So Arrijana was born on the 18th of June, 1997. She was born in Webster, Texas, and she was born to her parents, Opal and David. She had two brothers, one was older and one was younger. People who knew Arrijana say that she was a really bubbly, effervescent young woman. She was so full of life. She had loads of friends. She was hugely popular. She was active in her local church. She was a very pro-social young woman. She was known for her contagious smile and laugh. And the words used by one particular individual to describe her was she had a delightful spirit. She was known to be a very loving girl. She was an incredibly helpful girl. She liked to help people. There was just a great deal of good traits harbored within that child. Now, Arrijana was a student as well. She was at Glenda Dawson High School, that's in Pearland, and she was in the 11th grade. And I've taken a quote from one of her high school friends because I think it probably describes the light that she was in the world very accurately. Her friend said, "You could have been having one of the worst days of your life and she'd make you smile." And again, we have to always remember when we're talking about victims, because often they get lost in the brutality of the crime that we talk about. And it's so important for me that I bring to light and to life the individual that she was and is to the people that love her. Her end does not depict her beginning and the fullness of the life that she lived, albeit short. Arrijana was a really talented girl, really talented. She had a beautiful voice. She sang in the school choir, but she was an all-rounder. So she was an incredibly accomplished athlete. She played volleyball. She competed in track and field. In fact, she was particularly good at high jump. So we are looking at a girl with an incredible future. Any parent is going to want to have those kind of traits come out in their children, aren't they? Athletic, kind, compassionate, loving, clever, funny, sweet, and really popular with her peers, but for the right reasons. That's a good description of who this girl is. And it's actually through that athletics program, and we always think about our sliding doors moments and who gets to walk into our lives. And for her, somebody walks into her life when she's 16, Ryan Antonio Matthews, and it's through that athletics program that they connect. Now, like Arrijana, he's in the 11th grade. Now, Matthews had been quite strategic, so he had a very clear identity with what he wanted to do in the future. And it had led to him transferring from Pearland High School to Dawson in 2013. Now, the reason for this is he was, to be fair, a very, very talented athlete. He'd completed in track and football in his previous school. And his parents, basically, along with him, they kind of believed that they would have a better chance of him securing a future scholarship if he graduated from Dawson. So they're being calculating with how they're going to get him the best opportunity for the future. And this is excellent. Parents want to do that. You want to make absolutely sure that your child is going to have the best opportunities. So it makes perfect sense that they saw a different route and a better route to him achieving that. Initially, to be fair, he wasn't actually in the catchment area to enroll at Dawson. So he ends up moving from his parents, and he actually goes and lives at an address with an ex-girlfriend, Miranda. He lives with her and her parents, and this is so he could attend that school. I have to say, I think it's really kind of an ex-girlfriend's parents to put you up. I don't know about you. The idea of my parents letting my ex-boyfriend move in would potentially not work out well for them. But at the end of the day, all power to people who can manage that. So Matthews, he played on the junior varsity football team. That was at his new school. And he also represented Dawson in track. But his massive desire in the future was that he planned to play football at college level. And he actually had a profile on the NCSA athletic recruiting website. And his personal statement read this: "Making it to college is the most important goal, and continuing my sports career and taking my talents to the top. Education is number one, but football is my love." So again, everything at this moment in time is looking fantastic for these two young people. This young man looks like he's excelling. They're making strategic moves to ensure that his college education is going to be a positive one, and the likelihood is that he'll gain a scholarship, which is obviously going to mean financial security in that respect. And he's describing the fact that education is important and that he loves it, but that his real first love is football. What's really sad is, whilst that statement at first glance absolutely conveys what you would expect to wish to be conveyed if you're looking into that site to find a passionate, motivated young man, the truth is just how much he loved football is going to become horrifyingly clear in this particular story today. I genuinely mean it. So Arrijana and Matthews, they meet and they begin dating. They're 16, remember. So at the end of the day, when you are meeting people who are people you're falling in love with, and you're trying to behave as well as you can possibly behave, very often those relationships become intimate. It doesn't matter whether you're a churchgoer, it doesn't matter whether your behaviour is exemplary. Passion and lust, particularly when it's mixed with a heady amount of hormones, can be problematic for even the most restrained of young people. So they do begin an intimate relationship. And the first time that the couple actually have unprotected sex, that's on the 18th of December 2013. Unfortunately, for both of them, Arrijana falls pregnant, which is not a very great scenario, is it? It's an unenviable position for two young people. Children and babies are blessings, we will not deny that, but they're also a heavy lot of responsibility. And when you're young and you haven't got the resources available to you that you wish you had, it can be even more stressful. The family, of course, particularly Arrijana's family, are incredibly shocked. This is completely unexpected news, but they're amazing. Honestly, I think a lot of parents would really struggle with finding out that their daughter, who's heavily involved in the church and the community and all these things, is actually carrying a child. But they are supportive. And Arrijana even goes ahead and says that she wants to keep the baby. And again, I just think that is testament to a really resilient, committed, courageous young woman. And I'm sure that her family's support was incredibly helpful. But nonetheless, to be a teen mother, it carries a lot of judgment from society around you. It shouldn't, but it does. And also, you're giving up and sacrificing a hell of a lot, particularly when you're such a successful child yourself. But she's willing to do that. She's willing to sacrifice her youth so that she can bring this baby into the world. Now, both the families arranged to meet. They want to talk about the pregnancy. So clearly from both sides, there is a level of support there. It's worth noting at this point that when Matthews finds out that his young girlfriend is pregnant, he was not happy. He was really concerned. First of all, he felt that him having a child at this age was really going to impact on his chances of playing college football. He had this big dream of achieving a football career, and therefore he felt that anything that's going to create obstacles in that path could be problematic. Also, this fear increases substantially when Arrijana has a scan and it turns out that she's actually expecting twins. Now, I imagine for Arrijana, this is probably confirmation that this baby and these babies are meant to be. It's unusual to have twins. It's scary, but it's also breathtakingly beautiful. You're bringing two new lives into the world and they're sharing a womb and they're going to share the rest of their life with one another. And I imagine for Arrijana, it's a huge blessing in that moment. She's got used to the idea of being pregnant and now she's been blessed with two babies. Her boyfriend is really struggling with this, and we can absolutely have every empathy and sympathy. At the end of the day, even though she has decided to carry those children, and that is right, it is the woman's decision to make, it's her body, that must lead to a level of powerlessness and helplessness in the partners if they aren't ready for children. Because basically there are children coming even though you may not want them. And with that, there are huge obligations, whether that's from a financial level merely, because a lot of people will walk away from their children. But if you're earning money, there is going to be a consequence of that and you're going to have to financially take care of them in the future. That could be a problem on one level for this particular individual. Or it could just be more of a, I don't want children yet. I don't want to be involved physically with them. And now I'm going to have to, time-wise, be involved. So all of these different levels and layers, we can absolutely empathize and sympathize towards Matthew for, because he's thinking, I don't want this, but it's happening anyway. And also, he really struggles with the fact that Arrijana's pregnancy has become really hot gossip around school. Of course it has. Teenagers gossip about everything. It's one of those scenarios. Bitchiness, it happens all the time. Bullying, it happens all the time. Certainly when a good girl gets pregnant, it is going to be big news. And I imagine that Arrijana's having to front that all the time. But it's going around the school like wildfire. And Matthews is really unhappy about it. He hates the rumours. In fact, he ends up sending a threatening email to one of Arrijana's friends and says, you need to stay out of my business. In fact, this is what he says. If I hear you talking about me or having my name in your mouth, I swear to God, I'm going to go off at you. You fucked with the wrong person. I didn't do that in like a young person accent because it would be embarrassing. But that is the actual lifted message if you're wondering why I'm using slang. He also said to Arrijana that he was really pissed off with people talking about him, and he said, I'm going to go off at the next fucker that talks to me. So he's clearly feeling very exposed, and the level of vulnerability that he's experiencing in that moment is leading him to a sense of rage. We get to Friday the 21st of March 2014. Now at this point, Arrijana, because clearly she knows that her life is going to change substantially, there have been decisions made about her education. So on this particular day, she's already cleared out her locker at school, and that's because she's preparing to transfer to another school due to the pregnancy. Now, at this point in her pregnancy, she's around 16 weeks along. So, 4 months along. So she's going to be showing a little. She's certainly going to be feeling pregnant. She's going to be having some of those uncomfortable experiences in early pregnancy. And certainly the fact that she's made these plans to move forward with the pregnancy and to actually continue her education again is testament to this amazing young woman. Now, earlier that same day, she'd got a text off Matthews. And he said to her that he was leaving school early and he basically wanted her to come with him. This is at 1:41 p.m. Now, Arrijana actually texts back and says that she's with the coach and basically says to him, text me when you're ready to go. So 1:56 p.m, this is 19 minutes before class was actually due to end. Arrijana ends up leaving the school campus with Matthews and also with one of Matthews' school friends, because he had this arrangement with a school friend who would drive him around, so Matthews would pay him to do that. So Arrijana leaves with Matthews and this friend. The friend then drops them off at Arrijana's home on East Cedar Hollow Drive. That's in the Lakes at County Place community. Now, this is normal. They are a couple, nothing to see here, right? This is what we'd expect. They'll have done this many times before. Also worth noting that where they're dropped, that's where Arrijana lives, and it's a really secure community. So it's guarded and it's gated. It's in Pearland, Texas, and it has CCTV everywhere. And that CCTV actually captures the car arriving at the guardhouse, and it arrives at 2:02 p.m. Now, an hour later, around 3 p.m, that same friend who dropped them off returns and just picks Matthews up. Again, no big deal. He's been with his girlfriend a while and now he's leaving and getting back in the car with his friend. Now, shortly before 4:25 p.m, this is about an hour and a half after Matthews has left Arrijana's house, a 13-year-old younger brother arrives home from school. He immediately knows something's wrong. First of all, he notices that only one of the two locks on the back door was engaged. So he's a little bit cautious, just recognising that that doesn't feel like everything's okay. There's just something in the pit of his stomach, clearly, that's alerting him to notice that. I mean, a bright cookie. A lot of us wouldn't notice those things. He then enters the house and then again becomes more worried because he sees a lamp that's been broken. He sees a couple of other items that look overturned. And when he looks in his parents' bedroom, he's really, really aghast because it's just in absolute disarray. Now, at that moment in time, he actually calls for Arrijana, but no one responds. But he clearly thinks, my sister should have been here, clearly worried about that. And he's such a bright boy because he doesn't stand there thinking, what on earth do I do? He panics, of course, but then he thinks, right, I've got to go and alert somebody. So he runs to a friend's house, and it's here that he actually is able to contact his mum, Opal. Now, understandably, she's completely concerned about the fact that her son has seen this situation, and she's very concerned about what he's told her. And the reality is, of course, that no one knows where Arrijana is. So after he's got in touch with his mum and informed her, she actually texts Arrijana at 4:36 p.m. and just says, where are you? Now, Opal leaves work. She arrives home shortly after that. Can't even begin to compute how she would have been feeling in those moments. Anybody who has felt that a child has gone missing for a minute, you feel like your life is over. And even when they return safely, it can take a long time to get over that initial trauma and impact, because every worst fear you have ever had is culminated in those moments. So for Opal, she will be going home feeling absolutely convinced that something terrible could have happened to her daughter, but also in the same moment thinking hopefully it will all be okay. But one cannot begin to align themselves with that feeling unless you've been in a similar situation, essentially. She presumes, of course, at this moment in time that they've definitely been burgled, but I imagine that they're thinking, God, what if something terrible has happened to our daughter? She then contacts her husband, David. He's at work, and this is before calling 911 at 5:01 p.m. Now, David, he quickly returns home, And he's searching through the house. And unfortunately for David, because we all know those moments of impact, don't we? We all know that origin of trauma where your worst fear comes true and it's you seeing it, it's you computing it. For David, as he searches through that house, he may in the pit of his stomach have fear, but he can't possibly have imagined that he's going to find the body of his daughter. But that's exactly what he does. Arrijana is just lying on the bedroom floor next to her bed. She's wearing a pink shirt, she's wearing pajama bottoms, and there's just a small pool of blood beneath her body. And he rushes back out to his wife and he just exclaims, "Oh my God." Takes his wife outside, he holds her, he cries, and apparently she asks what was wrong, but she said that she already knew the answer. It's just incomprehensible to imagine that moment, isn't it? Their daughter, who is pregnant with twins, is dead, and they have no idea how this has happened and who has carried this out. When they looked at how she was actually murdered later, it was established that Arrijana had been manually strangled, but she'd also been stabbed multiple times, and there was a fatal wound to her neck. So one of the stab wounds had gone through her neck and it had actually severed her carotid artery. So that's the major blood vessel that supplies blood to the brain. You just bleed out. It's as simple as that. There was no way that she was going to be able to survive that. But just think about that, the strangling and the stabbing, that kind of an execution. It always really strikes me as the individual who's doing it, the intimacy of it. You know, the strangling someone and the stabbing someone, it's the close proximal execution of that individual. And it often makes me think of people who know the person that they're killing. There's something very, very intimate about that moment of killing. You're right next to them. You've been able to get that close to them as well. It always makes me very suspicious of people around them. We get to 5:10 p.m. The officers arrive on the scene, and obviously they establish pretty immediately the Arrijana is dead. They also can see straight away there's no forced entry. They look at the front door, they look at the back door, they've both been locked. So that meant one of two things. Either Arrijana knew her attacker or the perpetrator had a key. One of the things that they couldn't locate when they were in the house was a murder weapon. There was no sign of it at the crime scene. So whatever had been used, the knife or the sharp object that had been actually taken to stab Arrijana wasn't actually at the scene. So they ended up doing this extensive search. They went through trash bins, they went through drains at high school, but they couldn't actually locate the murder weapon. Now, I suppose on the face of it, it makes sense that the investigators initially, for a short period of time, felt that maybe it was just a home invasion gone wrong. But I think we can all agree that's incredibly rare. When you look statistically at home invasions that result in murders, it is incredibly rare. And often it's the person who's been the home invader who ends up getting shot. Particularly in America, where people have guns and they're very available and they're legal. If you cross somebody's threshold and happen to be lifting the TV out of the house and they see you, well, if you end up with 3 bullets in your back, that's going to be your problem. But when we look at murders that are so graphic and horrifically aggressive, it doesn't feel like a home invasion. It wouldn't necessarily make sense to up the crime to a murder charge. So again, that is going to lay heavy on the police's conscience. And it doesn't take long for them to start picking it apart. They start thinking to themselves, listen, this has been staged. This doesn't make sense. So in Arrijana's bedroom, for example, items had literally been removed from the dresser. They'd been scattered around the floor, but things hadn't gone. And then in a parent's room, yeah, okay, furniture had been overturned, but no valuables had been taken from the house. So it clearly hadn't been a burglary. And again, some burglaries do eventuate in people having their drawers thrown everywhere, wardrobes ripped out. There are all these horrible, damaging things that can take place. But often, if it's a planned burglary, even when it's opportunistic, as in they didn't know they were going to your address, but they were able to get in there, but nonetheless they were out to burgle somebody, they're often very strategic. So they know to go and look in jewellery boxes, they know to look for particularly expensive items in drawers. They're not necessarily going to be throwing things everywhere, because that can first of all cause more forensic evidence. You don't know what you're doing, you don't have the organisation, you're more privy to get your DNA on things and so on and so forth. So it doesn't really make sense. And not only was this a burglary because there's just stuff everywhere, it's chaos and it looks staged, it also eventuated in somebody actually getting murdered, which again is an escalation that's unexpected in these situations. So Matthews, her boyfriend, straight away is looked at with, I would say, a big dose of suspicion. So they quickly bring him in for questioning. Bear in mind, he was the last person to have actually seen Arrijana alive. So they're going to want to question him anyway, but I don't think they're just bringing him in to ask for some information. I think they're bringing him in because right now he is the most likely candidate to have ended Arrijana's life. Now, detectives bring him in, and pretty much from the get-go, they're really concerned about the way he's telling his version of events. They simply do not add up. First of all, he initially completely denies being at Arrijana's house on the afternoon of her death. It's bizarre that he does that, as far as I'm concerned. He is young, so we can appreciate he has a lack of sophistication when he's trying to make a fantasy up and marry it with what a reality is meant to be. Young people aren't the biggest forward thinkers. You learn consequential thought processes and thinking as you get older. You have a lot more evidence as to know how to act because the world reflects in a certain way, good or bad for you, and you kind of adapt and home into those skills as you get older. So we can forgive him for not knowing how to, shall we say, lie in a sophisticated way. And it's good that he doesn't lie in a sophisticated way because we want to find these kind of people out. But he's just saying whatever he needs to say to try to put himself some distance between himself and Arrijana. I mean, for the investigators, these kind of fantasies that are created by a liar are great because they're just so easy to break down on you. It's like, where were you on the afternoon of Arrijana's murder? I was not with Arrijana. Are you sure? I am completely 100% sure. Can you tell us why you're on CCTV then being dropped off at Arrijana's home and going to her house? I have not thought this through enough. I may need some time out. I'm thinking the words no comment from now on might be applicable, and who can get me a lawyer? Where are my Miranda rights? You know what I mean? At the end of the day, it's not difficult to pull this kid's idea of what he wants to create apart and replace it with the actuality of what went on. Because the investigators haven't just got CCTV footage. They're speaking to dozens of people. I mean, bear in mind, there were a plethora of people who want to talk. Arrijana's a really well-loved person. People are excited about her up-and-coming babies. She's certainly well-known in the area. And so they start speaking to her friends, to her relatives, and numerous students at Dawson High School all are validating the fact that Arrijana was with Matthews. They also spoke to Matthews' driver friend, who confirmed the movements on her last day. And it all confirms that CCTV shows Matthews had left with Arrijana from school. They knew that he'd been driven by a friend to her home, and then CCTV footage at the guardhouse captures the car arriving. So they've got him banged to rights in that respect, but he's just trying to get out of it. Now, police at this point, they want to think about the DNA and forensics. So they actually ask Matthews to hand over his clothes that he'd been wearing that afternoon. Now, bear in mind, Matthews has been caught on CCTV. I know he's still only 16. He doesn't have the sophisticated thinking, but I'm just going to throw it out there. If you're going to tell the police that these are the clothes you were wearing, such as the actual outfit you apparently have been seen in with Arrijana and the backpack you were apparently wearing when you were with her, and you hand those over to the police, you just don't have to do a lot of forward thinking to imagine that they'll go, just going to get this outfit, just going to look at the CCTV, just going to look at the CCTV. This kid is a really bad liar. These are not the actual clothes he was wearing. So that's immediately what they do. So the CCTV footage shows clearly that the clothes that he was wearing leaving school were different to the ones given to the police. So on CCTV, he's basically wearing blue jeans, a blue shirt, tan leather shoes, and a multicoloured backpack. And they can see that that isn't what he's handed over. And then when they start searching, the police actually find a pair of his jeans that had just been bleached. Now I know some of us were around in the 80s, and if you were around with the 80s, you may well have taken a pair of Levi's and decided to screw them up into different positions and then place them in a bucket of water and bleach in an attempt to look cool. I will tell you, it's the quickest way to ruin a really decent pair of jeans. Not that those of you out there probably would do something like put your jeans in a bucket of diluted bleach. Also, just going to throw out there, doesn't work well on hair either. My sister learned that way. You would be incredibly amazed at how yellow a fringe can go if you use domestic bleach products on your hair. Bit of life advice there for you guys. But yeah, these jeans have been bleached. So instantly that's going to be a massive red flag, isn't it? Now they do manage to actually recover all of the clothing that he was wearing in that video, except for the blue shirt. And the reason for this would become very clear, shall I say, later down the line. Investigators at this point will say suspicious. Should we say suspicious? I'm not saying they decided that they should just get Matthews off the street, lock him up, throw away said key. I'm just saying that they weren't necessarily looking for anybody else. Make of that what you will. But these suspicions that they've already got, they then get really increased. And the reason that they get increased is because Matthews had previously left Arrijana's house by the front door. And you actually see that Arrijana had hugged him, seen him off. However, the afternoon that she'd actually been killed, Matthews had left by the back door. And more than that, in spite of the fact that he'd left by the back door, which was unusual for him on a habit base, there was also no sign of Arrijana. Why wasn't she saying goodbye to him? That's a habit. We are creatures who tend to repeat patterns, and that pattern doesn't happen on this occasion. Also, it gets really disturbing because the detectives take Matthew's mobile. He's under suspicion. They want to check his phone, and what they find really concerns them. So there's a history that shows online searches about pregnancy. Now, on one level, of course, there would be searches about pregnancy. He's about to have twins, right? We would expect them to be questions about it. But they're not positive searches. So one of them is, how late can a doctor perform an abortion in Texas? How to cause a miscarriage? And if having sex while pregnant is safe for the fetus. Now, I guess the last one we could all give him a free pass and be like, oh, well, you know, lots of people ask that question. Of course, it is completely safe to have sex when you are pregnant. But if you are a young person and you're not educated in this area, it could feel scary, the idea of having sex when there is a baby in the belly. However, I don't think that's why he's searching that at all. I think he's searching to see whether it is safe, because ideally it won't be safe and he'll therefore be able to encourage sex so that she may miscarry. That's the take that I have on it anyway. Also, the investigators start trawling through the text communications that Matthews and Arrijana had between them. So we get to the 29th of January 2014, and at this point Matthews had texted Arrijana and basically said to her, have you started your period yet? And she actually tells him that she'd missed her period in the December and the January. Matthews responded, punch yourself in the stomach, lol. I mean, again, I would give him a pass on this. It's okay for him not to want those babies. It's okay for him to want those babies to disappear. You know, at the end of the day, it wasn't a decision that he was privy to some degree, and the chances are he's getting very anxious and worried at this moment in time because of the ramifications and possibilities that could occur if she was pregnant. And even though it's not nice, it's cruel, it's nasty, it's childish to say punch yourself in the stomach, he's 16. A lot of kids at 16 are all the things I've just said. Even though it could be interpreted as a joke as well, one of the things that is noted is there is a consistency in this kind of messaging. So he sent a lot of similar messages to Arrijana over days and weeks that followed this. And he did to be honest, make his feelings clear. I don't think she ever thought that he was a really happy bunny about these babies, because I think from the get-go he was showing that he was firstly very cautious about the potential of having these babies, and he was concerned about the impact these babies could have on him if she was pregnant. But there is a callousness in his messages, without a doubt. So she ends up taking a home pregnancy test on the 26th of February 2014. It's positive, and the doctor goes and confirms that pregnancy the following day. They actually estimated at the time when she took the pregnancy test and had that pregnancy confirmed that she was around 12 weeks along. So she was almost 3 months. So, you know, that's a time where decisions really would have had to be made, and it's very real at 3 months. Now, when he finds out, because she texts him to say, I am pregnant, he actually encouraged her to get an abortion, quote, so it doesn't fuck up our lives. And I get it. I do. Not that I'm promoting abortion for 1 minute. What I'm saying is, I don't think that's an unusual response. If you're scared about having a baby and you think that there's a way out and you feel that there's an option available and you think you're both too young, often abortions will be thrown about as a solution. I often think that they are not necessarily recognised as the traumatic experience that they may well be. People talk about abortion as if it's a simple process, or you can just get rid of this baby. But actually, many women, in fact, a high proportion of women and girls who have abortions do deal with some pretty horrific trauma afterwards. So at the end of the day, it's a really challenging dichotomy whether you go ahead with a birth or you decide not to go ahead with a birth, because I think on both sides there are incredible challenges. But with one side, I guess that you do get a baby at the end of it, and life in the long term may often turn out better than you might have imagined. Equally though, if you have a mindset where you can go through an abortion and actually get on with your life and not feel affected by it, then again, if that works for you, it works for you. I can kind of understand why a boy at 16 would feel that was the solution. He doesn't need to go through it. He won't carry the trauma. He can just get on with the rest of his life. But again, I can feel some sympathy and some empathy, even for those callous responses. Then we get 2 days after that. This is the 28th of February 2014. And he actually texts her, why risk our lives, education, and my sports career? Now, that statement is an interesting one, because the first part of it I can connect with. Why risk our life's education? I get that, because what he's saying is, look, we're both young, we're both being educated, we both have possibilities and opportunities, we have a long way to go. Why at this moment in time make a choice that's going to affect that, sabotage that? But he then says, and my sports career, that's singular. To me, when somebody does that, there's almost a, you're you, you're there, I'm here, I'm going forward. I'm the person who's going to have the life, the fortune. I'm going to be the one who's having the career. He's not really considering her at all in that. It sounds like he is initially, but when you break it down, it's all about him and his sports career. And it's an intriguing one, this, because yes, having babies can be problematic financially. It can mean, particularly when you fall in love with your baby, that you don't want to travel all over the world, which you might do in a sports career. It can do all of those things. But let's be honest, he wouldn't be the only person who's had a stellar sports career and had babies whilst he was young. In fact, one could argue that if you're seen to stand up to the mark as a young father, that people who are looking at giving scholarships would think, well, that's a guy with the right level of loyalty, commitment, connection, and good solid values that we want to invest in. So he's not seeing it in that way. He's just seeing this as a real problem. And the thing about problems is some people can create some pretty astonishing and diabolical scenarios to solve those problems. Then, of course, in spite of the fact that he's already having these conversations, there were the twins issue. So the 6th of March 2014 is when she discovers that she's carrying 2, not 1 baby. Now, she's excited, but Matthews isn't. I mean, for him, this is just putting lighter fluid on the fire. He actually texts her, what the fuck? That's not good news. Later again, he texts, can I punch you in the stomach, please? Lol. And I can't believe this is happening to me. Now, what does that tell you? very egocentric. It's all about him. How do I remove this problem? He's not bothered about whether he hurts her when he's punching her in the stomach, because this isn't a joke now, right? This is desperation. It's looking at resolving this situation, and it's saying, can I put you in danger by harming you to try to lose these babies? And even if she agreed to that, which she never would have, she wanted to have those children. I think that she's an incredible example of a young teen. The reality is that he would have put her at great harm if she'd agreed. Because when you miscarry, a lot of times you lose a lot of blood. Believe me, many of us have been there, including myself. But if somebody were actually going to cause a miscarriage by punching you, the internal bleeding could be dreadful. It could be life-threatening. So he isn't concerned about the harm he can do. He's just concerned about achieving an outcome. And that egocentricity is very, very clear in those statements. So they carry on examining Matthew's phone. And what else did they find? Well, he's not exactly the loyal boy that he's pretending he is. So he's got lots of contact with other girls. This time that is meant to be being a potentially new father to twins, where he's meant to be supporting his pregnant girlfriend, yeah, it's not happening. So literally 20th of March 2014, which is the day before Arrijana is actually murdered, he texted his ex-girlfriend Miranda. Now bear in mind, he was actually living at the home of Miranda. That's the ex-girlfriend. Her parents had allowed that to happen. And he was messaging her saying he loved her. So he's playing the field and he's saying what he needs to say to get where he needs to get, essentially. And then, of course, we get to the day of Arrijana's horrific murder. 7 minutes after arriving at her house, Matthews had literally started to search on the mobile. Can you smash a baby in the womb? Can you squish your baby in the womb? And after this, police noted that there had literally been no activity on Matthew's phone. And there'd been no activity for a total of 34 minutes. So from 2:09 p.m. to 2:43 p.m., he had had no activity. And this is unusual, because typically he was quite consistent in sending texts. He used to send about 200 texts a day. So investigators feel that that's when he murdered Arrijana. And at 2:43, he then starts texting again and texts his friend to tell him to pick him up. So then we have CCTV, and that CCTV picks up him leaving Arrijana's neighbourhood at 3:11 p.m. with his friend. Now at 3:24 p.m, Matthews literally sends a text to Arrijana saying, "Hey baby," and then he sends another 2 further texts quickly after that. But then he hadn't sent a single text to Arrijana's phone after that. So apart from those very quick succession of 3, it just stops. Why would you stop texting your girlfriend? The girl who's pregnant with your babies. You texted her a lot. Why would you stop? When she failed to respond, why would you stop? You'd expect to know why she wasn't replying, right? And the only reason that you would not be constantly trying to contact someone who wasn't answering their phone and text is if you knew that they weren't going to. Police suspected that he didn't message her after this point because it was a waste of time. He knew she was dead. It's a horrific idea, isn't it? So calculating, and also so throwaway, that you could just create this ruse where you've murdered your girlfriend, the pregnant mother of your children, and even the story as to trying to make yourself seem innocent by texting a phone, you can't even be bothered with that charade. You send 3 and you're like, yeah, job's done. That's enough. Enough effort into covering my tracks. How little did that gorgeous woman mean to him, that young girl? How throwaway is his attitude? And also, just a week after Arrijana died, Matthews actually transfers schools again. This is on his 17th birthday. And he moves from Dawson to Memorial High School, Pasadena, Texas. And the reason for that is he says that, again, he's going to have a better chance of getting college scholarships at Memorial, which is deeply disturbing because this is a week after the pregnant mother of his babies, his girlfriend, has died diabolically. The last thing you are going to be thinking about is your sports career. You're not going to be thinking about your college scholarships. You're going to be in the depths of despair, thinking about the gorgeous woman that you are going to be blessed with babies from is dead, executed horribly in her home. The trauma of that would see most of us unable to get out of bed, let alone be strategic in placing ourselves at a better college so that we've got a better chance of a scholarship. Also, it's pretty immediate that he starts becoming, shall we say, friendly with a 15-year-old girl, and that friendliness seemed to stop at the point of telling her about the fact that Arrijana had just been murdered and he'd been seeing her and she was pregnant. Now again, what does that tell you? You would be telling everybody. Everybody would be being informed of the horror that you're going through because you wouldn't be able to believe it yourself. There would be a period of telling people that you didn't really know very well, this has just happened. It's a way of making it real for yourself, certainly at that age. But the idea that he just transfers school, hooks up with another girl, pretends Arrijana hasn't ever happened, again, the disregard and callousness in his behaviour is breathtakingly upsetting. It really, really is. Now, at this point, even though Matthews clearly believes that he has outsmarted the world, I am brighter than everybody else in this world. The 3 text messages I sent my girlfriend, they will suffice to ensure that I am protected from any prosecutions. That kind of mindset, the police are obviously not quite there in agreement with his belief system, and they start to build a real true character of Matthews. So they speak to people that know him well enough, and the mother of his ex-girlfriend, so Miranda, the girl who he's saying, I love you, the house that he's staying at with her, the mum there says, look, this kid, lying and stealing reputation. He's a habitual liar. He'd also shoplifted from a department store. And also she says that the reason that her daughter broke up with Matthews was because he physically abused her and cheated on her. I am just going to throw it out there, that bit of life advice. If your child has been beaten up by a lying, thieving, absolute manipulator, don't invite them to live at your home. Just a bit of advice there, because I don't know about you. If my daughter had been abused by a boy, I would not be opening the door to him and saying, come and sleep in this bed. I would potentially open the door to him, and just as he edged himself forward to an area where when I slammed it in his face, it broke, I don't know, at least his nose. That could be something I could see happening. But again, people are very forgiving, particularly when people are young, and it just shows the level of disrespect this young man demonstrates, because even people who have reached out and helped him, he just takes advantage of. And again, the disloyalty is there in that relationship, is cheating on her as well. Also, even his teammates. So bear in mind, you know, education is number 1, but football is my love. What else is your love there, Matthews? What else have you got a little bit of a penchant for, light-fingered Larry? So the reason that his teammates are a little bit on the suspicious side about Matthews is things keep going missing from the locker room. And there is a surprising coincidence. These things only start to disappear when Matthews arrived on the team. Some could call it coincidence. Some could call it bad luck. Some could imagine that a magpie with a very good claw value to carry off things had arrived and removed wallets and sparkly things from the area. Or it could just be that Matthews is a great big thief. I'll allow you to choose from those particular options. I do think the magpie is obviously a very high contender in said crimes. But this in itself shows an absolute lack of loyalty. There is a pathology there, isn't it? When somebody can steal from their friends, and when it's obvious that that person is the one doing it, they might not be caught, but everybody knows. And in this case, that's exactly it. They don't actually ever catch the culprit who's done it. They've not been officially identified, but everyone knew it was Matthews. I'm going to throw it out there. I'm the kind of person who leaves traps. I have done it before. I'm not saying I will not do it again. I have a suspicious mind. I've worked in this field for a long time. I've worked with lots of people who, shall we say, have a penchant for being perpetrators of certain crimes. And at times, it's meant that things have gone missing. And I have been amazing at planning little traps so that I find out exactly who it is. And it's not because I wanted to get them into horrible trouble. It's that unless I can surface the behaviour and give them some consequences and help them understand the error of their ways, they're likely going to go on to do more offending that is going to be more problematic. So I completely would have gone ahead and created some kind of very, very good trap for that individual with CCTV. I'd have probably had like coats hanging, with cameras in the lapels, but they don't, but they all know it's him. I digress. So not long after he had been on the team and things start going missing, he's suddenly not on the team anymore. So he gets dropped. And apparently when he gets dropped, as opposed to going, fair cop, obviously people have started realizing what kind of person I am. Yeah, he doesn't do it that way. He gets really aggressive. He gets really defensive. So again, we're seeing that exploitative nature, that manipulative nature. And then we're seeing somebody who is almost resolute in their behaviors and defensive of their behaviors, even when they're found out. So this is somebody who probably has very poor impulse control, but also really doesn't care about the impact they have on anybody else. They just think about their own needs and they achieve whatever it is that's going to benefit them and their needs, no matter what the cost or who it affects. So all this is being brought up and all this is being taken in by the investigators, and now they're forming a really sinister picture and a malevolence within this young man, without a doubt. We get to the big break in the investigation, and this actually comes 2 months after Arrijana's death. And you imagine that her family must have just been clinging on to get some kind of news, because when you've lost a child in these kind of circumstances, and in this case, they lost 3. They lost their child and 2 grandchildren. You would just want the person caught immediately. The idea that they're walking around freely, breathing fresh air, eating good food, hanging out with friends and family, it just is a blight on their psychology without a doubt. But the results come in and the DNA testing links Matthew to the crime scene. So Matthews is found to be connected. Now, forensic evidence of Arrijana's body, well, they were also able to establish that Matthew's DNA was both in her vagina and anus. So they were able to say that he was definitely there on the day that she died. And Arrijana's DNA was also found on Matthew's bag and clothes that he'd been wearing on the day that she was killed. On top of this, very, very incriminating, traces of blood were found in his jeans and the shoes that he had been wearing on the day that Arrijana had brutally been strangled and stabbed. And on top of that, if it isn't grotesque enough to describe what I've just described, they were able to do DNA tests on the twins, and that proved that he was indeed the twins' father. So we're talking about the fact now that the man that they suspect is guilty of killing Arrijana is not just the partner, but without doubt the father of those twins, which is incomprehensible, isn't it? Now, Matthews at this point obviously knows, well, I don't know, he's got a bit of a problem, hasn't he? He's got a little bit of a problem in the fact that he's been lying through his teeth to investigators. Now he's thinking on his feet, isn't he? Hang on a minute. I'm going to have to figure out how to get out of this. So he starts to play the pity card, and he says that basically he's really panicked. When he heard of Arrijana's death on social media, he was really scared, he was really distraught when he heard the news. And he actually said, I had been at Arrijana's home that afternoon, but I'd just gone over there to have sex with her. But then I was really unsure of whether we should, because I was scared of hurting our unborn twins. Now, this is ridiculous in lots of levels, bearing in mind what he's actually been brought in for. But also, the fact is they've got DNA from her body that disputes this belief system anyway. And on top of that, The irony that he's talking about being afraid of hurting his unborn twins when he's been brought in for their murder. So he makes up this story that yes, they didn't actually have proper sex, they just kissed and cuddled, they talked about the future, they talked about baby names, they cried together. So we're painting this picture of not just this man who is young and scared and really concerned about his babies, he's also thinking about the future, they're crying together, he's loving, he's empathic. I mean, it's just sickly, isn't it? Because it's about as far away from the reality of what you know about this character. According to people who know him well, I mean, this isn't just on the bare face of cold facts. We're talking about people who know him dispute that this is anything like who he's describing himself to be. Also, he does the whole, okay, I am scared. I am unprepared for being a dad. I am scared about the impact that Arrijana's babies and my babies are going to have on my future career. So he plays that, please feel sorry for me, but I am admitting it. I've got nothing to hide. This is just why, again, it's a faux attempt to be somebody with a sense of passion and feeling. And it's trying to draw the officers in to think, oh, poor boy, we understand why it's a scary time and so on and so forth. So he's just being honest about the fact that he is concerned about the impact that it's going to have on his chances to go into college. I'd say that's the only truth that he tells. That specific thing that he tells them honestly, well, I'm really worried about the way it's going to impact on my future career. Like I said, that's where he would have passed a polygraph on just that question alone. So on the 13th of May 2014, Matthews actually gets arrested. He's arrested at school, in his new school. That's not going to look good on the CV, is it? And here, rightfully, he's charged with 2 counts of capital murder, one in relation to Arrijana and her first unborn child, and the second in relation to the second unborn child. It's really important, isn't it, that those babies are recognised, that their lives are taken as priceless and so important and paramount to the family. I think that's so important for Arrijana's family. Now, at this point, he pleads, not guilty. Of course he does. I'm not guilty. We have literally CCTV of you going into the house. I'm not guilty. I want to be a footballer. We literally have your DNA all over the poor victim's body and your clothes are covered in the blood. I can kick a ball a relatively long way. I'm innocent. That is the only defence he would have had, isn't it? Let's be honest. Wouldn't have made sense, couldn't have actually been anything to do with contesting the facts, but he's going not guilty anyway. I guess part of that with respect is because if he is found guilty, potentially face a death penalty. And that would be quite an overwhelming situation for a young man to face. And he's just trying to lie himself and lie his way out of it. So he gets taken to the Brazoria County Juvenile Detention Centre. This is where he's going to await trial. Now, following his arrest, I can understand the fact that Arrijana's parents just expressed their joy that someone had finally been taken into custody for their daughter's murder. And Arrijana's lovely, loving, doting dad, David, he stated this: God managed to give me the strength to just hold on until he said the time was right. Lost more than a daughter, a friend, my buddy, the one who could make me smile and laugh no matter how bad my day was. I completely connect with that. Because when you lose a child, and in this case we're talking 3 children, you can imagine challenging your own mortality, questioning it, thinking, can I do this? Can I wake up tomorrow? Is the pain going to be so unbearable as it is today that eventually I just give up? And he just kind of connects with that sense of God made me hold on. And now my reward is I get to see this bastard being brought to justice for the brutal destruction of my family. And bear in mind, this was his daughter and grandchildren. So then we get to the time of his trial. It's April 2015. Matthews has actually turned 18 at this point, so he ends up getting tried as an adult. And Arrijana's family very bravely attended those proceedings, bearing in mind, when somebody goes not guilty, you are going to have to be privy to all of the horrific information. You're going to have to see the autopsy. You're going to potentially have to see pictures. You're going to hear what happened, because the prosecution, believe me, they paint that in graphic detail. So even if you had your eyes closed, you will be able to visualize every blow. every bruise, every discoloration of skin, all of it, because they bring it to life, and they have to, because the jury needs to know what they're dealing with. They need to hear the willful destruction of a life. They all wore actually pink and purple, and the reason that they did that was Arrijana felt that pink and purple were her favourite colours. So the family actually went representing her, dressed that way, inescapably letting everybody know we are here for Arrijana, we are her voice, and we are here to see justice carried out. Now in court, Matthews does the classic thing and just admits, yeah, I did lie. I did lie to detectives loads of times throughout the investigation, but I was just really scared. I was scared to be considered a suspect. You should not have been scared that you were going to be considered a suspect. You should have been completely aware and knowledgeable that you are the suspect because you actually are the perpetrator. Just throwing it out there. Just throwing it out there, Matthews. Shouldn't have been a fear, should have been an absolute knowledge. You did it. But anyway, he's trying to paint this picture that he's just this innocent kid. He just lied. He didn't want to get into trouble. He thought his parents were going to be angry because apparently he'd skipped school at the end of the day because he was going to have sex with Arrijana. So it's all about the idea of painting this picture of, I'm just like this innocent, naive boy. Didn't want to do any of those things. I'm really sorry for lying. But this is an 18-year-old young adult now. The fact that he's telling this story just stings of somebody full of falsehood. It really does. And he actually even says, listen, if I had killed Arrijana, I'd be a man and I'd fess up. I mean, he used the words fess up, which I think kind of drops the I'd be a man bit to a very immature level, because I don't know many men who walk around going, yo, I'm going to fess up, you know? Just doesn't really make sense, particularly in a court of law, I would say. Now, during his testimony, he looks really uncomfortable, and it's weird because when he's asked certain questions, particularly when he's asked questions about things that are sexual, you know, to do with the fact that there was a sexual encounter with Arrijana before she died, he kind of smirks quite a lot, smiles. There's just not this connection with what he's talking about. You're in prison in a juvenile centre and you are now facing a potential death sentence. The last thing you're going to be doing is smiling or shifting uncomfortably when you're getting asked sexual questions, because yeah, I get it. I laugh in the most inappropriate places. I really do. When I'm nervous, I do find things funny, but not in situations like that. When I went to my father's coroner's inquest, and it was deeply uncomfortable and very painful and incredibly nerve-wracking, I didn't laugh at any point because it was so important. The emotions were so heightened and so devastating. And it's like that in this scenario. He's not connected. He's not connected to this reality of what he's actually done. And he's almost laughing and smiling when he's asked these questions about his last sexual encounter with Arrijana. And in court, he even goes so far as to say, yeah, I did actually throw away that blue shirt. You know, the one that I then pretended I hadn't thrown away because I handed a shirt to the police, pretending it was what I wore on the day. But he's got a backstory for this. Of course he has. He said basically it had a hole in it. It had a hole in it. So, you know, I just threw it away. I didn't sew it up. I just chucked it. It's all coincidence, Judge. It's all coincidence. Much like all the things being stolen in the locker room. It's just coincidence. Same as when I went to the new school a week after my girlfriend was brutally murdered by a stranger, and I didn't tell anyone at the new school that I had anything to do with her or potentially becoming a father a few months down the line if she was still alive. All coincidence that I didn't do that. I'm completely innocent. But anyway, this is what he says. He says he's got a hole in the shirt. And he also admits in court that, yeah, you know, I do get angry very easily. I am one of those people. So he's kind of trying to build this picture of like, look at me. I'm admitting all of my flaws and weaknesses. I'm telling you the truth as to why it looks bad, but really it isn't that bad. Yes, I did do things that were wrong, but I didn't do this. You know, he's trying to weave that. Look how honest I'm being now. It doesn't work, but certainly that's how he's trying to carve this scenario. And he did actually, with respect, I'll tell you, when he was questioned in court, remain relatively calm, but again, just smiling quite a lot, just a slight smile, and that doesn't sit well with me at all. Again, I appreciate he's young. Again, I appreciate that he's probably in a situation that provokes a lot of nerves, but I just don't connect with that smiling. Now, the prosecution, what do? Well, absolutely, as you would imagine, they portray Matthews as a serial liar, that he's got a bad temper. They say he had a motive to murder Arrijana. He was going to become a father. He was at risk of losing his future football career, which he absolutely was obsessively committed to. They said he had opportunity. You know, his friend dropped him off with the victim at her empty home, and the prosecutors then alleged that they went on to have sex, and then he just brutally killed her. And then, of course, there was that staging of the house invasion, so knocking over furniture, making it look like potentially somebody had come in. And they add to that, it even more compounds this reality that we're discussing, because he then throws away the shirt that he was wearing because it was bloodstained and gives the police a whole set of different clothes. Now, the defence, did they have one? Sorry, I'm being sarcastic. They didn't really have one. I'm just saying it. Before I tell you about the defence, I'm going to say it was like they were going, we don't have anything. We don't have anything. Have we got anything? I don't think we've got very much. But have we got anything? I genuinely think he's banged to rights. We have to defend him though. I know. Just go in there. Try to connect. That's what I'd say to do. Go in, just try and connect with the jury, you know. So the defence basically go in and they say that the police had approached the investigation with tunnel vision. You, police, you came in to this investigation, you saw the fact that the most likely candidate for killing this poor girl was the boyfriend, who was very unhappy, according to all the searches on his phone and text messages, that he was going to be a new dad, who swapped his clothes and gave you clothes that he wasn't wearing, who did have blood splatter on his actual clothes when they were found. You took all of that, including the CCTV of him being dropped off at the victim's house. You took all of that evidence, well, I mean, you'd call it evidence, we'd call it just circumstantial stuff, and you decided to just tunnel vision home in on this man as a suspect. How very dare you do that with all of that evidence that I've just talked about. It's all irrelevant. He's innocent. That's literally what they did. They said that they just zeroed in on him, thought he was the prime suspect because of all the evidence, because of the CCTV. Anyway, this is what they present, and they say that this meant that they disregarded all of the possibilities. And apparently there was a landscaping crew who were working at the property nearby when she was murdered. Gonna throw it out there. As a defence, that's not necessarily a great defence, because I think if you look on most housing estates, most roads, there are always other people around, aren't they? You know, you can't just willy-nilly walk in and be like, he, with all the evidence pointing directly at him, didn't do it, and I'll tell you why, jury, that he didn't do it. It's because, yes, he was in the place. Yes, he was seen at the scene of the crime. But the truth is, there's a shop down the road with someone working there. I close my case. That makes no sense, does it? But as I said, I feel like one of the things that they were told to do was just connect with the jury. So when he describes the fact that there are these landscapers around, the defence describes them as bad dudes. Bad dudes. I feel like the landscaping organisation should be able to sue for defamation. I mean, bad gardeners would potentially be acceptable, but you can't just be walking around going, yeah, those landscapers, you know, the ones totally unrelated to this crime. They were bad dudes. Why? Do you know them? No. But I know because I just saw them. The way they were handling those chrysanthemums, the way they got those magnolias, the way they were trimming those bushes. Bad dudes. I imagine the jury were just like, I don't know where they're going with this. Also, the defence pointed out that the police had found unidentified footprints and fingerprints in Arrijana's house. If you came in my house, there would be many of those too. I have no idea who comes in and out of my house sometimes. people have work done, we have workman in, and they last a long time, those kind of things. But this is the case that they're placing it on. They're saying that, yes, you've gone and chosen this guy and then built the case around him, even though the case is clearly built around him with evidence. They also say that the presence of Matthew's DNA in Arrijana's body didn't actually prove that he killed her. I agree with that. They said that it only proves that they had sex before she was killed. Absolutely, that's true. He also lied about that. Remember, he was asked about that and he said they just kissed, they just cuddled. There was none of that intimate stuff. He didn't want to affect the baby. Literally his words. So even though the defence is painting that picture, they're again substantially connecting him as a liar. So then we get to the 23rd of April 2015 and there's 5 hours deliberation. We've got a jury of 8 men and 4 women and they convict Matthew on 2 counts of capital murder. Now, Judge Patrick Sylvester, he was the one who was later assigned essentially to pass the sentence, and he actually gave him life with the possibility of parole after 40 years. Now, the reason that a lot of you will be sitting there thinking, hang on, Em, you've done cases before where people have been given 950 years for less. You're right, I have, but there's a reasoning behind it. The maximum sentence that could be imposed was imposed in this case. Because Matthews was a juvenile at the time of the offence, he was 16, that means that the only sentence he could have been given was 40 years at that point where he was tried. So even though he could have been looking at the death sentence, that was never going to be the reality, essentially. So 40 years, he had the possibility of parole. Doesn't mean he'll get it, but he had the possibility of parole. Now, Arrijana's mother, Opal, she went and read the victim impact statement, and I think we can all agree the people who have lost so dearly are Opal and David and family. It is just excruciating to imagine that they've had to live through this, and it must be excruciating as well to know that he gets to live through this, if that makes sense. I mean, I know he's never going to pursue his dreams as a footballer, but he gets to live through this. He gets to have 3 square meals a day. He gets to form relationships in prison. He gets to have visits from his family. He gets to learn and be creative, watch TV, do all these things that girl, the mother of those twins, will never have the opportunity to do. And that must be horrific for Opal and David. So Opal read this out in court. She said, "You deserve this for your selfishness and this senseless act and the impact it's had on so many lives. You're a true depiction of a wolf in sheep's clothing. You could have chosen to move on and to do better in life, but you chose the coward's way out. You get the coward's reward." I mean, that's powerful. But again, in my heart, I just feel, how must they really feel knowing that he gets to live his life day in, day out? That even one day he might get a touch or a taste of freedom. When you think about Matthews, he takes narcissism to a whole new level. He takes narcissism to serial killer level. Let's remember that. He used girls for sex. He was an abusive and compulsive liar. All that mattered to him, full stop, was his future football career. And when something threatened it, there was a simple equation he used: destroy it. In a twisted attempt to safeguard his own aspirations, essentially, he killed a much-loved young woman, a daughter, a sister, a mother-to-be, with everything to live for. He killed those unborn twins whilst killing her. The tragic irony here is that Matthews, within that narcissism, failed to understand that as he destroyed her life and their life, as he destroyed Arrijana's family's security, he destroyed his future. He destroyed his own life in the process. He'll be approaching 60 when and if he actually becomes eligible for parole. You have to presume, I suppose, on a psychological level, if I'm trying to objectively look at what we know today, that there is a case for him being an individual with antisocial personality disorder. You just have to think about his habitual lying, his criminality, his stealing from the people that he was playing sport with, the abuse of his previous girlfriend, the absolute narcissism, the lack of remorse, the willingness to use extreme violence to effect a change that he wanted. They never actually found that murder weapon, by the way. I talked about that earlier on. But they actually believe that that's because he just went to Arrijana's home with that weapon. Premeditated it, planned to kill her, fully intended to take her life, and did that after having sex with her. So lulling her into that false sense of security, that intimacy, and then murdering her. Following that poor girl's death, that poor mother's death, I will use mother because it breaks my heart that she was never called that in her life. She never held those babes in her arm. They were always in her belly, but she was a mother. She is a mother. After she died, Opal actually founded the ACH Rainbow. It's a non-profit organisation which raises awareness of domestic violence. So ACH are Arrijana's initials, so Arrijana Simone Hill. It's a beautiful name, isn't it? And she really does hope that in doing that, in creating that legacy work, she's going to empower young people to spread awareness about abuse and also just to educate parents on the warning signs. So when people isolate you from the family, etc., just to understand those red flags. And to date, the foundation has literally facilitated thousands of dollars in scholarships in Arrijana's honour, which is just incredible. What incredible humans people like Opal are. In the UK, 1 in 4 and 1 in 6 men will experience some form of domestic abuse in their lifetime. In the 3-year period between April 2017 and March 2020, there were 362 domestic homicides. 59% of victims were female, killed by a partner or an ex-partner. It's a terribly shocking statistic, isn't it? It's statistics that I think we all know exist, but it's truly terrifying to think that most people who meet their end, they meet their end at the arms of a partner that's meant to love them. I know that all of us will feel an absolute empathy for Opal and David. I know that we will all feel that that young man got exactly what he deserved. Some of us will feel that he deserved more, but as is appreciated, a 16-year-old is seen differently to a 30-year-old, and often that's for the right reasons. What worries me about Matthews is he seems to have the absolute hallmark traits of an antisocial personality disordered individual of the highest degree, certainly narcissistic, certainly psychopathic. Can he be cured? Highly doubtful. Let me know your thoughts. I'm going to dedicate this, of course, to Arrijana and the babies that she never got to birth, but I know that somewhere in this universe and other dimensions, she will be bringing them up and they will be very safe in her arms. To Arrijana, to her family, be safe, guys.